Hello everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to teach you what is exception in Python. Now, if you're not familiar with exception, I'm going to show you from the scratch, just don't get worried about it. Now, exception in Python is mainly a compile. Exception is two types in Python. One is called compile time error and another is called runtime error. Now, these things I'm going to show you in more details in this video. So let's just get started. So open your PyCharm. Let's just create a new file. This has exception and done. Now let me just give you a first compile time exception. Compile time exception is just some random error like this. This is what you say, a compile time exception. See, it gives you a name error exception. And another is called a runtime exception, which is like this. We have a variable I equals 2, and if I try to divide I with 0, it's going to show you a runtime exception, where it is division by 0 exceptions, which is actually 0 division exception. Now there is a multiple exceptions in Python. There's name error, value error exception, and lots more. But there's a keyword name, there's a value name exception, which refers to all of them. Alright, so let's just try doing handling the exception. Now, if you try to run a block of code which is after an exception, like look at this. After this exception, I want you to run this block of code, then it will show an exception and it's gonna break the code immediately. But you want your program to handle this exception, do everything you want, and in the end, the other blocks of code is going to be printed. So how are you supposed to do that? By using three keywords. We're gonna learn these three keywords. It's called the try keyword, the except keyword, as well as the as keyword and the finally keyword. So let's just start it. Right. So just gets an exception and breaks from the code, and I want you to prevent doing that because it's gonna be a really problem if you're working in development. So by handling exceptions, you need to put a keyword named try. Try refers to try executing this block of code. If you get an exception, which is except in other programming language, you find catch, but it's except in Python. Now, if it catches an exception, now there's multiple exception type, but whenever I say exception, it refers to all of them. It can be any exception. So now I want you to print what is exception. I'm just going to print an exception. So even though I get a runtime error, it's going to handle this exception, print the following code, and execute the other program. And this is how exception works. But if I didn't actually use these try except blocks, they're going to directly break from the code, which I want to prevent doing that because it's a really big deal if you're working in production. Alright. Now I just want to see what's the exception. I can use as keyword. Now as keyword refers to this exception as a variable e, and I just want to print out the e variable. As you can see, it's division by 0 error. Now if I say 0 division error, it's also gonna work the same, but refers to exception, it means every single exception. Now you can try to see all the exceptions by yourself, but I'm not going to show you right now. Alright. So this is how you can catch an exception. Now it can be multiple exceptions as well. Now suppose I have this exception and I want to accept another exception. Now I'm going to say 0 division error, print exception. I want exception 2 and this is exception. So this is going to get executing this program, it gets an exception and it will try to execute the first block of code because this exception also refers to the 0 division error. Now if I say name error, as you can see, it's going to run the exception 2 because by executing this block of code, I didn't get any name error exception. Now name error exception executes whenever you do a compile time exception. So it's used for compile time exception, and I'm going to show you later. Right. So it isn't a name error exception, so it's like an elif block. Now this if condition isn't true, then you go to the zero division error and see if the exception is zero division. Now it is, so it returns exception 2. This is how simply it works. Now if it is a name error, let me just give you an example of a name error. This is a name error because this thing isn't defined. See, it returns exception because this. And now if I just say exception, it's also going to show you because it refers to every single exception, like name error, zero division error, as well as value error, and lots of more. Alright, now this is except. Now it's like an elif block in Python, but it's not if else. It's an elif block for exceptions by using to except keyword. Alright. The final thing I'm going to show you what in the exceptions. This is what you say a compile time exception, and this is what we say runtime exception. You can see it by if the PyCharm shows you an error at the line or just shows a red on the line, you have to you know that this is a compile time exception. And if it doesn't and you still get exception, it means it's a runtime exception. Now you're clear about that? I'm going to show you the last and final thing about exception is the finally keyword. So final keyword is a keyword is, let me just give you an example. Let me just say handled exception completed. So what it's gonna do is if it successfully executed the following program, then you're gonna if it's executed the following program, then it's gonna run the finally keyword after that. If it doesn't and gets still an exception, so no matter what, after doing all of these things, it's gonna return this final. If you get an exception, this still is gonna run handle exception complete, and if it doesn't, or if it successfully executes the program and it's not going to print it, and it's still going to print it. So it's going to print it no matter what. See, as you can see, it's a name. I put it as a name error, but there are no name error. So what's happening here? So it is a zero division error exception, but I say a name error exception. As we know, there are no name error exception, so it just breaks out of this except block and shows you an exception and breaks the whole code. So it needs to be a zero division error because there are no name error exception here. As you can see, even though it get an exception, gonna hand exception and then handle exception. And now what if you don't want to do anything at the zero division error, you don't want to print anything or do anything, just use the pass keyword. And in the end, if you don't want to also do anything here, you can also put the pass keyword as well, as we learned in our keywords video. See, this is the actual implementation of the exception in Python. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video.